Time is 9:01. And it's being recorded, right? I heard that. We'll have the roll call for quorum. It is now 9:02. Ms. Mendoza, would you please call the roll?
Yes. David Beckham.
Present.
Thank you. Ted Cook.
Here.
Buchanan Davis.
Present.
Patrice Horseman.
Present virtually.
Thank you. Pete Kim.
Here.
Thank you. Richard Lunt.
Present.
Sue Montgomery. Here. Tim Tamure. He's walking
Here
in.
virtually and walking in shortly.
Thank you. And Jonathan Lines.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is confirmed. Now calling on non-voting members. Tom Bushatsky. Colin Wogenstahl. Ray DeCiccio.
Here.
Thank you. Gail Griffin.
On Zoom.
Thank you. Sina Kerr. Karen Peters.
Here.
Thank you. Robin Saeed. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. Priya Sundareshan. And Sandra Watson. Roll call is complete.
Thank you, Ms. Mendoza. For the record, please remember to identify yourself when making a motion or requesting to speak. For those attending virtually, please ensure you are unmuted for any votes. In addition, if any board member wishes to depart the meeting at any time, please announce your departure for our recorded meeting minutes. Additionally, with sensitivity of the microphones and the acoustics of this room, the sound quality may be much better for our colleagues attending virtually if you leave these on the table. All right. Do we have any disclosures for conflicts of interest?
Good morning, Joseph Kelly, General Counsel. No disclosures been submitted for today's meeting.
Do we have any members that would like to identify and disclose a conflict for any item on today's agenda? And if so, this would be the time to do it. All right, hearing none, we will continue on. We'll go to agenda item number 3, the director's report. Chuck.
Thanks. It's a packed agenda today. It's kind of cool. We've got a little bit of everything. Got projects for your consideration on conservation program, on the water supply program, as well as the SRFs. I do want to touch base on some of the things that have been happening on the long-term water augmentation fund since the last board meeting. We had a pre-offer conference on December 10th, I believe. It was a very, very good response from industry to that pre-offer conference. Very well attended. I think we had over 100 attendees. Between online or virtual, most of whom appear to be potential industry participants. By our count, we had representatives from about 20 unique engineering firms, about a dozen financial institutions, but a dozen different development firms, a handful of construction firms, and a pretty good representation of local, state, and federal government representatives. I think that's a very good sign for the outreach that we've done. A very good sign for the interest that we've done. A very good sign that I think the committee and the board has put out a very robust solicitation, is very clear about what WIFA wants, and I think industry is definitely paying attention, and hopefully will give you what you want. We've also had some very good media coverage. I think robust media coverage, print, radio, TV about the solicitation. I look back at where we were about 2 years ago and some of the media coverage and the description, inaccurate description, sort of mischaracterization of what WIFA was doing. And I look at where we are right now, 2 years, and I think I'm very, very happy with the way that this has been described, with the intent. I think that appropriate intent and description of what WIFA is doing. Despite all our hard work on the solicitation, we are still finding some small errors. So we've issued Amendment 1, which is really just you approved a solicitation. Included in that solicitation was Section 10, which was a form of the base contract. The document we posted publicly didn't have that Section 10, so we issued an amendment. The amendment was essentially just to correct that error of not including the entire document in what was posted. So that amendment is posted. Next in the process, the next major step is the initial qualifications submittals. Those are called the IQSs. That's essentially the list of what the teams are. That'll be the first kind of cut that the WIFA will make to the industry applicants. We have received a number of questions from potential proposers around that IQS. We had a deadline of December 16th for the cutoff to accept questions around the IQS. Expect that deadline to be extended for a few more weeks. We've been pleased with the questions that we've received from industry, and we're preparing formal responses. Some of those have been identifying just minor administrative questions within solicitation, and others are asking good clarifying questions. We are not planning at this time of extending the IQS submittal deadline, though. That is still at January 16th, so that'll be the next big milestone for when we receive information from industry. And we're still operating on a date of January 30th for our notification of who would be the qualified proposer. So who's made it through that first filter into the IQS. Certainly internally, some of our internal bandwidth, we are shifting from the development and solicitation to working on the offtake. We've talked at length about working with potential customers and off-takers as a parallel process to working with industry on developing water importation projects. At this point, it's mostly internal discussions, but I would expect in the very near future, reaching back out and starting that next step of working with potential off-takers on what those structures and agreements look like. Ted, we don't have you on the agenda for an update. Anything else you want to add to that long-term?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I would like to echo Chuck's comments about, wow, what a change from a couple of years ago. And in particular, the last event that we had related to this solicitation was last week's pre-offer conference, and we had a couple of dozen people in the room and 90 online. But what really got my attention was the press attention to what had happened, including in Newsweek and Axios. Now, these are national news organizations. It's quite an accomplishment, and it just reinforces that this is for real, as if anybody doubted it's a real thing. It's a big thing, and we're getting notice. With that being said, there also has been, I think, a little attention about P3 that myself and a couple of the staff have been to a couple of those events. We've had interviews from P3 related publications and things like that. And in my opinion, at least, P3 has got lots of advantages for us as an organization to be able to do the phased procurement that we're doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to end up with a P3. And we're the last organization, after the experiences that we've been through, to embark on some kind of predetermined outcome. So let's all not get ahead of ourselves as far as where we're going with all this. We have a phased process for a reason, and I just wanted to remind everybody inside and out of this organization, don't read too much into where things might end up in a year. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ted. And then just a few more remarks on some of the work that's been going on behind the scenes. We spent a lot of time in this room over the last year on the Water Conservation Grant Fund. There was a lot of focus by the committee, a lot of focus on the board. That sort of left the focus of this room, but I would say from a WIFA perspective, we are probably busier now than we were a year ago on the Water Conservation Grant Fund. We have 185 grant agreements working right now. Each one of those, as we've talked about before, this is a reimbursement basis program. So every one of those 185 grant applications, as they spend money, they submit a request to WIFA through the accounting team led by Derek Bosworth, through the project team led by Sam Lemke, and a huge amount of work by John Riggins, who stepped in to fill our gap right now temporarily in the grant administrator. They look at every one of those requests. They look at how, if it conforms with all the rules, how it fits in their project, look at the receipts. Frequently, have to do some back and forth with the applicant on each of those, have to go to Joe and ask for rulings on the legal interpretation. Then we process that for payment. It goes to the governor's office. They put another layer of review on that, a bunch of back and forth about, are we willing to pay this bill? The governor's office finally gives us the money that we can give to the grant recipient. And that's each spend from each of those 185 grant recipients that comes in, day out. It is an incredibly important program, but I just want to highlight all the work that's going on to implement that, even though we don't spend any time in that. And a lot of those teams, the accounting team, the project team, those are the exact same people who are implementing the SRFs, who are bringing you everything that's on the agenda today on the SRFs, and the same teams who are implementing that water supply development fund. So as we implement that new program, that evolving and ever-changing program, those are the same team members who are processing that as well. So I wanted to give a shout out to all the work. We see these summary slides, and there's an incredible amount of work by Lindsay and Denise's team to make that happen. And then finally, the next meeting we'll hit on here at the end. I would ask you to be flexible. Right now, we don't have we've got a very full agenda today. That is really sort of clearing the decks on a lot of the program issues. We don't have much of an agenda teed up at this point for January, other than hopefully to make progress on hiring a director. So I would ask you to be, we have it tentatively scheduled for January 15th. It would be hopefully a short meeting. If we can move that up in time, or if we have to move that back in time, please be flexible. But we may not have a 3-hour board meeting full of projects, so we could be flexible with the timing of that. And we are planning on having that in our new facility. So this is our hopefully the last meeting that WIFA has in this room, and we'll have it in our newly furnished, newly outfitted with dedicated WIFA board space. For me on any of that.
Questions, comments, or concerns? David?
Are you working on a schedule for all of our meetings next year so we can get them set up all quickly?
Yeah, so we can put that out. At this point, we are still intending to keep on the third Wednesday of the month routine. We have also committed to our legislative members that as they finalize their committee membership and their legislative schedule, that we would poll the board members once again and see if the third Wednesday morning is still the best time for maximum participation by board members. But Yolanda, we can make sure we get that out at least as a placeholder for the 9 a.m. on the third Wednesdays.
And I wanted to ask the board members if 9 o'clock is the best time, or if there's another time that should be considered, and we can put that in the polling as well. All right, thank you, Director. We'll go to the SRF financial update. Denise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the purpose of this agenda item is to provide the board with more information on disbursements related to our loans. And this was asked for during our financial plan approval process to kind of come back with an aging report of how loans are dispersing funds. So this is an attempt to address those questions. So if you go to the next slide. So to Chuck's point, not only do we have the conservation grant disbursements, but we also still have about 560 million of existing disbursements on the SRF funds that need to be processed. Our financial plan forecasted 190 million cash flowing this fiscal year. Based on recent trends, we're lowering that amount to about $184 million, and that's based on actuals through November. And again, just want to point out that the financial plan, which really gives the board an idea of when we need to do a bond sale to meet our cash needs, we're anticipating that to be in 2027. So it's far out there. We don't want to issue any debt before we need to. So if we go to the next slide, want to dig into, okay, what are those commitments that we're looking at? So almost 350 million of the commitments that we have outstanding are for new loans, right? So loans that are just beginning to start or haven't started at all. We also have some loans that are older, right? So you see that at the last bar. So now I'm going to dive into just another layer down into each of those bars so we can see what those characteristics look like. So next slide. So if we look at the new loans, 340 million of the commitments are from these 100% loans, but 24 million of those commitments are for loans that closed prior to 2024. Okay, so most of these are new loans. We have 316 million that were from loans that closed in 2024. Also remember there was one loan that was about $105 million. Of the 316 million, there's 88 million that's related to our I'll call it the earmark programs, which is lead service lines and emerging contaminants. So if you look at that, most of the commitments are from newer loans, or they're from projects where we received money. It took the entities some time to get those projects going, and that relates to the 88 million. or it's from that 105 million one loan, which we have them on a cash disbursement schedule, if you recall, and they are already starting to take disbursements. So we anticipate that this is moving forward, and I'm not too worried yet about these because they're 2024 loans, and we are starting to see some activities in those loans, in those projects. Now, when we went back and looked at 2023, because we have that data, we do see that disbursements took 18 months from the loan closing date, which is a long period of time. So we're hoping that because we implemented the new policy, the readiness to proceed policy, we're hoping that that 18th month is a little bit shorter when we look at 2024, but that's yet to be seen. So if we go to the next slide. So on this next one, we want to look at kind of what the bars at the end of this look like. We have about 67 million of commitments from loans with projects in process. And that includes one $25 million loan, which had a recent scope change. So when we look at these projects, we're looking at things like, can we de-obligate some of those funds and put them back into the bank for future loans? There are some monies related to that, which we'll be de-obligating by the end of this fiscal year. But there's also projects where they run into just issues because these are projects that were prior to the readiness to proceed policy. So we're seeing some issues with environmental, we're seeing some issues with just public processes and even procurement processes, right? So it's just taking a little bit longer, but they are in process and we do foresee that those loans will close out in the near future. So we go to the next slide. This is one more look at how much of the commitments per loan closing date. All right, so if you look at loans that were closed in 2024, as I stressed, most of our commitments are from recent loans. But we do have about 13.39% that were loans closed prior to 2021. And that's where Lindsay's team and the loan team are really trying to focus our efforts and trying to clean that up. And then we have loans in the process of projects. What we're seeing is projects are taking about 4 years now. And that's, again, delays in startup. So just a little bit more data and more information there. So going forward, if you go to the next slide. A couple of things is we recently just did the readiness to proceed policy. I'd like to give that some more time to see if we can benchmark whether that's made improvements and where those improvements were made. It'll also allow us to see if there's additional improvements we need to make to any of our financial policies, but I want to make sure we're addressing the problem and being very intentional on what we change. I also think that we need to be conscientious of our loan demand. So loan demand is not as high as it was last year, so we want to keep that in mind. And then also, I don't know if WIFA is really being heard because the earnings of our pooled cash is still significant. So we're earning money in our pooled cash accounts. And the other thing is we're not going to issue debt until 2027. So the risks are minimal right now on what is hurting WIFA in terms of having these commitments. Again, most of the commitments are new commitments. And I think we need to give this a little bit more time to just really see how our readiness to proceed policy is playing out and what the issues are so we can address them effectively. So that's a status update on cash disbursement monitoring.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you very much, Denise. Buchanan, talk to us about the Water Supply Development Fund Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been a fun, busy couple months on the Water Supply Development Committee Fund Committee. There's been a lot of work done, and as we work to overcome the tension, that word's been used a few times, and as we try to figure out what the right what the right balance is moving forward. There seems to be a little bit of a paradox that the committee has had to grapple with. A fund with a couple different distinct characteristics. One being that the legislature gave the fund a significant grant element with a fairly high cap of a couple $1 million. Another characteristic is they wanted the fund to continue to give out loans and to be revolving. So it's not an easy balance as you structure a program that gets out money to communities, communities that need projects, that need the work, that haven't had an opportunity to have access to some of that type of money and opportunities. Many of these communities are smaller, rural Arizona communities. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you get that money out to work for these communities, but make the fund as sustainable as possible? And that's what we've been grappling with, trying to figure out, you know, the ranking, the financial capability of the communities, the scoring of these projects in a fair way that incentivizes financial self-sufficiency, but also being responsible to the needs of these communities. That's a tough balance. But I feel like the committee has done a really good job and working through that. And every member of the committee has been very respectful, putting their positions out, but you can tell that there has been some differing views. I've been taken back a couple times to when the Water Supply Development Fund was expanded and actually funded a couple years ago. And there was this idea that, hey, we're working on a large augmentation project that we heard about and the progress that we're making there. And these large projects will go to benefit Central Arizona. And although that water isn't going to be free or maybe not even cheap, that water will be here for the needs of the valley and urban Arizona. And so I would say the founders or those who were expounding this felt that it was very important to also look out for the interests of rural Arizona. And they put money into the Water Supply Development Fund so that money would be put to work for rural Arizona, that they wouldn't be left behind. And they built a committee with very strong rural representation. That was on purpose. And we saw some of that being manifested in the last couple of months. If you watch the committee meeting, that shines through. Again, good work by every member. I appreciate the dialogue that went back and forth, the debate, everything that went on. You know, lots of different things, like I said, that we were trying to grapple with. You know, from some of our perspective, maybe these communities could put some more money. Maybe there's some room for them to take on debt. But then as we got to talking to these communities, we realized that many of them, well, that wasn't necessarily the case, or maybe they had actually put a lot of their own money in and different things like that. So it hasn't been easy. It's been a difficult thing. Where we ended up is on Monday in our meeting, we passed a resolution. That resolution does have an aggregate cap, 60-40 split, where only 40% of the total money allocated so far would be allocated towards grants. That was the committee had asked staff to say, once we get to 40% of the money, which is about $60 million, we'll do no more grants and we'll just do loans. That's the path we're on. That's the resolution that was passed. Again, I'm proud of the discussion, the hard work of the committee, you know, as the committee chair, I stand by the direction that the committee has set. We, of course, have allowed ourselves room at any time. We can redirect and reprioritize and reorganize the program down the road, but for now, our course is set, and I think it's a good course. And even with some of the split votes, as you might see later on the agenda, I intend to support the committee's recommendations and defer to their good work and defer to their work moving forward. And of course, my ask for the board would be to do the same. But I appreciate the opportunity to serve as chairman and offer this status report. Again, it's been a pleasure, a lot of hard work, and I think we're on a good path. And we're starting to fund some really good projects. I don't know if you want to fill in the gaps there, Chuck or Lindsay, but.
Like it. Well done. Thank you, Buchanan. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. And agenda items 6 through 9 are noticed as consent agenda items and will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion unless otherwise requested by a board member. A reminder of those attending virtually, please ensure you are unmuted for the vote. Do we have any requests to pull any items 6, 7, 8, or 9? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Mr. Chair, this is Tim. So moved.
I have a second.
Second, Richard Lund.
All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. We'll go to the regular agenda. Members of the public wanting to speak on the regular agenda items may request to speak prior to the chairman opening the discussion on that item. For instructions on how to submit a speaker's card, please refer to the notes on proceedings at the end of the meeting agenda. We will go to agenda item number 10, and Scott will lead the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 10 is Mountain Glen Water Service Incorporated. It's a disadvantaged community of approximately 1,000 people west of Sholo. The community requested and was previously approved for WIFA financial assistance to add a new water campus to provide redundancy for the system. In July of 2024, the board approved a 180-day extension to the original resolution to provide time for the FPC to consider request for a scope change and to address standard terms to allow for assumption and consolidation that they also subsequently have approved. A draft resolution addendum A 2025-011 was presented to the FPC on August 14th, and the committee voted to recommend approval to this board to allow the change in terms and scope. The requested scope change was to purchase a privately owned well on a vacant parcel within the service area instead of constructing a new well, which is under the original scope. The company had been looking for over 2 years to find a suitable property and did not have any success until coming across this privately owned well. With the property identified, WIFA staff determined that an environmental assessment was necessary, and the process was initiated with a WIFA appointed consultant. To date, the EA is still in progress. And
Scott, can I stop you real quick?
Yeah.
Can you, we're having a hard time hearing you. Can you grab, regarding
Is that
previous
better?
comments? Go ahead and pick it
Okay.
up.
Is that better?
Yes.
I'll try to talk louder too,
Thank you.
sorry. So going back, they identified the property, an environmental assessment is in process. It's not completed, and once the actual work is done, it's going to require a 30-day public comment period as well. That is going to put us beyond the expiration date of the resolution of January 15th. So they are requesting that we do an additional extension, just allow the environmental assessment to be completed and that process to be completed. And then we'll present the resolution approved by the FBC to the board. Again, it was a readiness to proceed issue. We didn't want to present it until we had this environmental issue done. And once that's done and presented to the board, then the borrower is willing to get the loan closed and start doing the work. We do have online Brian Thomas representing the borrower, and if there's any questions, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Scott. Are there any questions from the board for Scott?
Mr. Chairman, not so much Sue Montgomery, not so much a question, but sort of a topic I wanted to ask about or discuss a little bit. I think when this came around before, I asked the question about, can we purchase property with these funds? And I vaguely remember this, and I think the answer was yes at the time. But what's troubling me about that is, for purposes of purchasing property and well siting, go ahead and putting this money out there for those things, that was a lot of uncertainty. Siting a well, acquiring the property and siting the well is a lot of uncertainty. And that has borne fruit here where, thank goodness they were able to find an existing well within their service area. But that has caused a lot of delay in this process. And so I guess my question to the staff is, are we obligated to put these dollars if applicant asks to purchase property where they don't even have the property identified? Are we obligated to do that as part of a package, or is it something that we have some discretion over doing? under these funds? And you may not be able to answer right now, but I'm supportive of this, but I think it shows the problem with not, giving dollars to purchase property, to site a well that then turns out to take years to figure out, and in the end, they can't find that property, and they have to find a current property with a well on it, which is great for them, but that's a long delay, and I was thinking of the conversation we had earlier about some of these funds sitting, so that's why I asked the question and raise it.
And Sue, I guess I would say to that, and that's part of the reason why we're putting in the readiness to proceed. This originally came to us before that was in place. Now we'll make sure that they have the ducks in a row, so to speak, before we start bringing it to the board. So we're not putting that commitment out there just to set for a period of time.
So if they came to us and said, well, we want some of this money to buy property, we don't know where it is, we haven't figured out the location, we haven't sited the well yet, you would say we are not in a situation to have readiness to proceed?
That would be, I'd defer to Lindsay on that, but I would say we would basically, yeah, we want to make sure, come back to us when you have a property identified, and then
Okay.
we'll proceed.
Okay. Just wanted to raise that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Is that the age-old question of the chicken and the egg?
Absolutely, and your wisdom is just incredible.
Yeah. Appreciate the moment of levity.
I would actually suggest have the chicken, and then you'll know you'll get the egg.
Sounds good. Do we have any additional questions from the board for WIFA staff? Have we received any requests for public comment?
We have not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do we have any additional board discussion? May we have a motion for agenda item 10, the loan resolution addendum A 2025-40?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we pass the loan resolution addendum A 2025-040 to the Mountain Glen Water Services.
Thank you, Buchanan. Do we have a
Mr. Chair,
second?
this is Tim, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Addenda item number 11, Scott will continue to lead the discussion.
Okay, thank you again. Agenda item number 11 is McNeil Water Company. McNeil Water Company is requesting financial assistance of about $193,000 to install essential components to their water system, including a storage tank, a system water meter, electrical controls, a backup generator, a propane tank, and a chlorination system. The storage tank is needed to provide sufficient storage capacity to meet the requirements of a 2024 ADEQ consent judgment. The system has had a long history regarding this compliance issue, as noted in the due diligence report. And while we are hopeful this funding will provide the solution required, we did note a managerial finding regarding the delay in resolving the ADEQ violation, as well as a lack of a succession plan, and that the company operates on a yearly loss. In addition, the company's current bylaws have not been provided by the applicant and will be required prior to the execution of the loan. And McNeil Water is a single manager operator run system. The manager has not requested a rate case due to the time involved and desire to keep the rates low for the small customer base. They have 24 connections. McNeil Water Company meets WIFA's criteria for disadvantaged community and is a priority community. It was ranked number 4 on the PPO just presented in the earlier agenda item, consent agenda. In recognition of the need for getting additional storage in place, and because the current financial challenges of the company, WIFA staff recommends 100% forgivable principal. We should have the system manager, Neil Peterson, online, and we're open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have any questions from the board for staff or for the applicant? Seeing none, do we have any public comments?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there any additional board discussion? Yes.
I was curious earlier about why this particular project, Drinking Water State Revolving Fund project, was on the regular agenda versus the Senate agenda we had earlier. So I talked to Lindsay before the meeting, and she said that the committee, the SRF committee, had quite a bit of discussion about this project. And I asked, well, is this have anything to do with the long period of time that elapsed between the technical assistance grant for design and the loan itself. And he said, well, some, but not entirely. So I actually would like the board to hear maybe a synopsis of what, the committee obviously brought it to us with a recommendation to approve. But I'd like the board to hear a little bit about that discussion first. Okay.
We can report on that.
If Karen's willing, the FPC chair, Karen Peters, maybe can summarize that. I think there was some good discussion both from the ACC and ADQ on this project. If not, we can give the update.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we did have, I wouldn't say a lengthy discussion, but a pretty probing discussion. And the system manager, Mr. Peterson, was online and able to answer some questions about the operation of the system. And it's, I think we were particularly focused on succession planning for the water system. They have been out of compliance for quite some time. Our experience at ADEQ with systems like this is that sometimes it's a family-owned system and there's a death in the family. There's no one willing to pick up the reins to run the thing. And so what we often see is that residents are in a very bad way when that occurs. And so we were really interested in understanding their approach to that, as well as their approach to the financial issues that were discussed, that Scott described. So ultimately, the committee was satisfied that the system and Mr. Peterson specifically are very aware of what needs to happen going forward. I believe he's on the line. I think I heard that he's on the line. And so he can certainly respond to questions along those lines, but it was a good discussion. I was really proud of the committee for asking really important and difficult questions, but the system was deemed worthy of this loan, this forgivable loan.
Ted, to your agenda development question, it was really that there was enough concerns raised in the due diligence that raised discussion points among the committee. At the end of the day, staff is still recommending approval. The committee is recommending approval, but we wanted to make clear to the board that there were those concerns, that those have been evaluated. But the intent of putting it on the regular agenda rather than consent was to make sure that we're daylighting that and the board's well aware of those concerns and the committee's positions.
Ted?
Sure. So thank you. I appreciate that. And Chairman Peters and Lindsay and Chuck and your comments. I think this, I know we're not taking a vote yet, but it illustrates that particularly for these priority communities, disadvantaged communities, the importance of having availability of this type of funding to do this necessary work. Notwithstanding some of these concerns about will they really be able to do it. And this just emphasizes again the fact that yes, this is something that is really needed more than ever, but we and they have to pay the proper amount of attention to make sure that this actually gets done in a timely way.
This is Neil Peterson. Could I weigh in at this point? Hello?
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, with regard to the timing and the length of time between the initial Tres Rios design development plans and today, there were a number of attempts to resolve this issue, which would not impose a significant financial burden on the community, since the community is economically disadvantaged. In particular, there were several attempts to get a used tank down from Donny Park near Flagstaff. It was an excess but serviceable steel tank, 9,200 gallons. Unfortunately, that was damaged in transport and deemed unusable. The local school board at McNeil Elementary School has a in compliance system less than 2 blocks away from the town system. They were approached in 2 different administrations to consider acting as a backup to the town system and therefore bringing the town system into compliance. They unfortunately, on those occasions, declined to take advantage of that opportunity, which would have benefited them as well, in the sense that they would then have a backup to their system. More recently, there was a technical assistance grant, and there is now, in fact, an 8,000 gallon high-density polyethylene tank in place. And this grant would then facilitate connecting that into the system and providing reliable, drinkable water to the community in the foreseeable future. The other change to be considered is during the period between 2010 and 2019, I was employed full-time in my professional career for the U.S. Army. I'm now retired and have a bit more time to devote to this. I am an engineer, so I feel I do have the requisite experience and expertise to conduct this project successfully. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Any additional discussion from the board? Anything else from staff? Bring it back to the board. Can we have a motion for agenda item number 11, loan resolution 2025-039?
Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery, motion.
Thank you, Sue. Do we have a second?
David Beckham, I'll second it.
David, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? If none, the motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 12, 2025 WIFA administrative budget revision, and Denise will lead the discussion.
Thank you. So this one, we do not have bar charts. I just have numbers for you. I'm trying to get away from all these bar charts. So this is to provide the board an update on where we're at with our admin budget. What we did was we looked through our expenditures through November, and we have been very, very busy at WIFA over the last few months. So what we have seen is based on how our expenditures are trending is we have 2 situations where we have higher than anticipated cost, especially in the area of moving expenses. But we also have some timing issues as far as our long-term water augmentation project. As you know, we have gotten the solicitation that included a base contract out on the street in a very short period of time. So we're seeing some of our expenditures condensed in that area. So what we're looking at is instead of having a budget of about $5.8 million, we're anticipating that we're going to need about $6.9 million to finish out the fiscal year. The good news is there are some decreasing trends. So we do think we're able to lower some salary and benefit costs due to some vacancies and also travel. Because we're so busy in the office working on all these things, we're not traveling as much. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, this is for an update and possible recommendation to increase our budget of about $1.1 million.
David.
So basically, the outside services are increased legal fees and engineering costs.
Correct.
Yeah, for mainly for our long-term water augmentation fund, I say.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if you go to the next slide, I do have one more slide to show you how we're allocating these costs between the programs. And you can see that most of this cost is hitting the long-term water augmentation because that's where we're spending the money. However, when it comes to our moving expenses, we are allocating that throughout all of our programs because they all benefit. So we are being consistent with our original budget.
And what happened on the moving expenses? Is it furniture or is it?
Correct. Furniture. A lot of it was labor for installation of equipment. And in talking to Garrett and Chelsea, we were pretty good at estimating the equipment needs, but it's the labor associated with implementing that equipment or installing that equipment.
You go back one slide. Ted, I think you frequently and David have asked about the timing issues. If you look at our 24 actuals to budget, you'll see we overestimated the cost of outside services in 2024. So we revised our 2025 budget to go back to closer to actual, and then we're now revising back upward. So a little, it's just that sort of startup learning of when, and the same thing on equipment. We thought we'd spend a lot more in FY24. We didn't, so we brought our budget down in 25. It turns out that we were actually closer to what we thought it was going to be a year ago.
All right, do we have any additional questions from the board for staff?
Pete's got his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Yep. So this is Pete Kim. Just to clarify, so on the timing issues versus some of it was timing issues, some of it was sort of more expensive than expected. What amount is the pull forward versus what amount is more expensive than expected?
So I would say that the amount, if I understand your question correctly, I would say about 400,000 of that 1 million is because of expenses that were related to timing. And then I would say there's probably about 200,000 that's related to expenditures that we've already spent that weren't anticipated. And then the rest is related to the moving cost.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Any other questions? Have we received any requests for public comment?
Mr. Chair, we have not.
All right. Any additional board discussion? May we have a motion on agenda item 12 to
Mr. Chair.
revise the 2025 administrative budget?
Mr. Chair, this is Tim. Move to approve the proposed revised budget.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have a second? Chair, Ted, second. Thank you, Ted. We will call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, agenda item 13, recommended modification of policy 2-19, long-term water augmentation fund procurement, and Joe will lead the discussion.
Thank you, Chairman Lyons. Everyone's favorite topic is always policy updates and revisions. So on April 17th, this board approved policy 2.19, the long-term water augmentation fund procurement policy, which assigned roles and responsibilities amongst WIFA staff, the long-term water augmentation committee, and the board as it pertains to procurements from that fund. As the board will recall, statute authorizes you to do rules, statute authorizes procurements. Our rules then put in place the specifics for how that procurement was going to function, and the policy then internally divvied out roles and responsibilities under those rules. So when the board first passed this policy, WIFA anticipated using the long-term water augmentation committee as the primary evaluators for responses to a solicitation. However, during solicitation development, the committee determined it was appropriate to appoint a separate group of evaluators to provide recommendations to the committee, and the board subsequently approved that solicitation on November 20th. The changes proposed by staff today are meant to conform the policy to the solicitation that was approved to avoid any confusion and inconsistent information out in the public. I'll note this policy changes, that nothing in this policy changes the rules which authorize procurements for the long-term water augmentation fund, and nothing in this policy changes any aspect of the solicitation previously approved by the board. It's primarily administrative cleanup, and staff is requesting the board approve the modifications to this policy, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board for Joe? Do we have any requests for public comment?
Mr. Chair, we do not.
Okay. Last call for the board. All right, maybe we have a motion to approve agenda item 13.
Mr. Chair.
Ted? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recommend that the board approve the modification of policy Roman numeral 2.19 LTWAF procurement.
Thank you, Ted, for that motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, this is Tim, second.
Thank you, Tim. Any additional discussion? We'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes. Agenda item 14, resolution 2025-024- Town of Camp Verde WSD-051-2025. And we need a longer title there. Extrapolate it out. Lindsay's gonna lead that discussion. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Camp Verde well replacement project includes replacing an inoperative well with a new, larger well that will also incorporate the necessary arsenic treatment that is required. The town of Camp Verde has one existing WIFA loan secured by a pledge of drinking water system revenues. And Camp Verde is able to meet the debt service coverage projections as the town continues to modernize the operations. Additionally, they have approved a multi-year rate increase as of November of 2023, and that should provide the funds needed for future investments in drinking water solutions. The Water Supply Development Committee met in November and recommended approval on this project by a 4-2 vote with 1 abstention for the amount of $2 million in a grant, $1.6 million in loans. There was no significant findings noted by staff, and I believe we have applicant representatives in the room available for any questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Do we have any questions from the board?
I just one real quick.
David?
It's really a little bit tangential, but I know that Kim Shonick was on our water conservation grant fund. She led it. And we've done quite a bit of work in Camp Verde, and I was wondering if this has any relationship to it or how this will affect some of the water conservation efforts done.
How this project would
Yeah, I
relate
was
to their
wondering if
conservation
it was
efforts?
discussed in context with that.
I don't believe it was brought up in context with their conservation efforts.
Would you like additional due diligence on that, David?
We can ask them.
Yeah, we should ask the
Yeah, I'd
applicant.
love that.
Michael? Or
We have
who
Jeff.
do we have on the phone?
We should have.
Oh, Jeff, okay, sorry.
Make sure that button is green.
There it is. So we don't really have a water conservation component to this particular project. It's more of a, we need system redundancy that in the summertime, we're pumping 2 wells full on, and we don't like that situation, so. But we do work with Nature Conservancy on a regular basis, and Kim, and we're looking at some water adequacy studies and things we'd like to work on in the future.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Could you also state your name for the record, please?
Oh, Jeff Lowe, Utilities Director for Town of Camp Verde.
Thank you, Jeff. Any additional questions for the applicant? Bring it back to the board. Do we have a motion for resolution 2025-024 Town of Camp Verde WSD 051 2025?
Mr. Chairman, I would so move Richard Hunt.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay, okay. Pete, is that you?
Yep.
All right, 10-4. Any abstentions?
Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery abstain.
You abstain, okay. Then the motion carried. You want to do a roll call?
All right, members of the board, as a reminder, this is a motion to approve the resolution before you for the town of Camp Verde. We'll start with Mr. Beckham.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, back to it. Well placement does have a lot to do with the flow of the Verde River. And I was wondering if that was considered in where the well is being placed.
So our Mangini well site is several miles at the base of Mingus Mountain. It's not in the the subflow zone of the Verde River. So it's a very good location for our wells. And actually, we haven't seen much drawdown in that particular area either over time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jeff. Any additional questions?
No, just a comment,
Okay.
given the work that I do in that area and not with Camp Verde, but with the Yavapai Apache Nation, I can confirm Mr. Lowe's point that it is outside the subflow zone and it's in an area that is not anticipated to have a drawdown on the subflow zone, although until that's modeled, we don't know for sure, but it is definitively outside the subflow zone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Bring it back to the board. Any additional discussion before we call for the question again on roll call? If not, go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beckham,
Aye.
Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Horstman,
Aye.
Mr. Kim,
Nay, I'd like to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Yeah, so I realize this is kind of a symbolic vote, but in the as was kind of alluded to, there has been a lot of back and forth on the Water Supply Development Committee around just sustainability versus today versus tomorrow, and like, you know, kind of the very, very difficult sort of decisions that you have to make when you don't have a crystal ball for the future. I registered a nay vote here just to be in consistency with my previous vote. I don't like to kind of leave a record that shows I voted for it one day and against it a different day. And so I don't think it changes the vote one way or another, but I did want to just have that opportunity to explain my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We can always count on you. All right, please proceed.
Mr. Lunt,
Aye.
Ms. Montgomery abstains, Mr. Tomyer,
Aye.
and Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 7 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 14A, resolution 2025-024- town, I'm sorry. Did I skip that? I gotta go down to 14B. I apologize. Resolution 2025-026- Tucson Sanitary District WSD-041-2025. And Lindsay will lead the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Tucson Sanitary District is faced with critical challenges in providing reliable reclaimed water, which accounts for up to 55% of the town's total water use. This project would involve upgrades which would be necessary to restore the operational capacity of their 250,000-gallon wastewater treatment system, which has been offline since August of 2020. These upgrades would restore their reclaimed supply capacity and ensure reliable service for fire protection, irrigation, and other critical needs. They currently have no debt, and they have the ability to take on more debt with excess revenues over the past 5 years. Therefore, debt service coverage is expected to be between 1.05 and 1.13, with revenues increasing by 5% and expenses by 4% annually. The Water Supply Committee recommended approval for this project by a unanimous vote for the $1.768 million in grant and the $2.652 million in loan, and there's no significant findings noted by staff. And we should have the applicant representatives available for any questions from the board.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Do we have any questions from the board for WIFA staff? Have we received any requests for public comment?
We have not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any additional board discussion? May we have a motion on agenda item 14B for resolution 2025-026?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Patrice?
Yes, Patrice Horseman, I would move for the passage of resolution 2025-026 for the Tucson Sanitary District.
Do we have a second?
Pete Kim, second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. We go to item 14C, resolution 2025-027 for the city of Douglas. Lindsay will continue.
Thank you. City of Douglas is planning to expand their water and sewer services to the west of the city towards their new commercial port of entry. So this request would fund a portion of the drinking water line being proposed. Douglas currently has 3 SRF loans, all of which are in good standing, and the financial review determined they're well positioned to continue maintaining a minimum debt service coverage on those loans. The Water Supply Committee did recommend approval of this by a unanimous vote for 100% grant for $2 million, and there are no significant findings noted by staff. And we should have applicant representative Luis Pedrosa available for any questions from the board.
Thank you, Lindsay. Do we have any questions from the board for Lindsay? Have we received a request for public comment?
We have not, Mr. Chair.
All right. One more time to the board. Questions, comments, or concerns? If not, may we have a motion on agenda item 14C for resolution 2025-027?
Mr. Chair, this is Tim. I would move approval.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have a second?
Sue Montgomery, second.
Thank you, Sue. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? If none, motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 14D, resolution 2025-028, Mojave County Flood Control District. Lindsay, you're still up.
All right, so the district has requested $2 million for their Crestwood Detention Basin. This is a project within their overall program to build a stormwater basin in the Kingman area in the Hualapai Valley INA. These basins will help provide stormwater retention, flood control, and potential recharge of the aquifer. WIFA has provided $3 million as a water conservation grant towards the overall program back in 2023. And you will see within the resolution, we added a restriction on the water supply funds as it relates to the matching requirement, basically stating that none of these water supply funds will be used to meet the minimum 25% match for the conservation grant. The district doesn't hold any existing debt, but are well positioned to fund current and future obligations. They did have a finding in their single audit, which was noted in the staff due diligence report. However, staff believes the district has taken appropriate steps to address those findings. The Water Supply Development Committee recommended approval for this project by a 4-2 vote for the 100% grant for $2 million. And we should have applicant representatives available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the board for Lindsay? Ted?
Chair, not really a question for Lindsay, if I may, but this was reported in the material in the board packet. Prior to the committee reaching its 4-2 decision on this particular item, we'll note that items F and J, exactly the same thing happened. So we don't have to go through this whole thing again for those two thoroughly. That in the earlier meeting that the Water Supply Development Committee had, which was, when was that? November something, 25th, something like that. We had asked for, we had tabled basically all of the same projects except for the first two that we just approved to get more information on, call it the financial capacity to borrow. And so the staff did that and came back with some additional information on that for us. So I, for one, noted that those three that I mentioned, Mojave County Flood Control District and the other two, F and J, did appear to have some ability to borrow. And so I actually made a motion to modify the recommendation from the staff from 100% grant to 80% grant and 20% loan, just to recognize that this tension, to use Chairman Davis's word there, between sustainability and putting the money to work and meeting needs for those communities that have needs today and those communities that will have needs tomorrow. We did show a slide, I'm not going to ask for it presented here, a slide that had, to me, a pretty disappointing outcome on this particular fund if we move forward with this 60-40 split, even with the aggregate cap that was described earlier, without further appropriations from the legislature. This fund will be depleted by 2040-ish. With only one more round of funding, and then we'll be out of money. So this is, again, a symbolic attempt to recognize that not all of the applicants necessarily, even though they qualify and would be eligible for 100% grant up to $2 million, necessarily need to do that with exclusively grant monies and may be able to bear a little bit of loan monies. So that motion, and on the other two as well, ended up in a 3-3 tie. We only had 6 committee members there, and then came back for a 4-2 vote. And not to put him on the spot, but Chairman Davis was the one whose vote changed there. And to not put words in his mouth, but what I think he said was, on the first time around, was he would prefer to take the first approach, but seeing the need to actually move a recommendation forward to the board, change his vote on the second motion, which was 100% grant. One final comment here. One of the reasons for doing this, besides my view that some of the applicants have an ability to borrow money at very competitive rates, at least a little bit. that, that some of the rationale why that shouldn't happen was, well, we're changing the rules. And I object to that characterization. The rules are that applicants are eligible, some applicants are eligible for up to $2 million of 100% grant funding. But I do not believe that this board has committed in advance to automatically approve all such applications in advance and give up our authority to modify the actual composition of the board. So we do have 3 board members who are here today that were not at Monday's meeting. It just happened on Monday, which is why I bring it up. Probably some of you have not had time to review all that, but I wanted everyone on the board to know that that had happened and why. And I'm not necessarily inclined to go through that whole thing again this time around, because I'm not sure that we'll get the support. But I'm prepared to make that motion and try it if I have other board members that would like to have the opportunity to vote on something like that.
Thank you, Ted. Pete has his hand up. Pete, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Pete Kim. Piling on to the comments of Director Cook. Look, big picture on this stuff is as follows. We've got a certain amount of money. It was unspecified how much was supposed to be in grant and how much was supposed to be in loan. If you loan money, then theoretically you get it back and you can use it over and over again to do more good in the future. You can only give away money once. So this is the central sort of question mark around whether or not you have a fund that can sustain itself and to kind of in subsequent rounds, do more good by having it, quote, recycle. Of course, what the committee did do was to establish a guideline of 60-40 in order to put forth a guardrail that says, look, we are going to only give away this much, and we're going to make sure that X amount is going to be in loans so that we will have a second or third or fourth bite at the apple. And as Director Cook alluded, even with that, you still see that it kind of depletes pretty quickly, but at least we got something. At least we got more than, what we were thinking about on the other hand. What ends up happening, though, is that if you put in a guideline like that, but then leave it up to the kind of tactics of each individual application, then it kind of sets up a first come, first served, is the way that the committee was debating it, situation where people will get more or less depending upon not their need, but when in the process they happen to apply. And, that just seems like, okay, that doesn't seem totally ideal. So there was a motion to try to at least figure out how to balance that so that we can not disapprove of people for a full grant because we think it's a bad project or we think that they're bad people or anything like that. It was just to make sure that we've got enough for tomorrow to help the other folks who happen to who otherwise would get less just because they happen to be further back in line. The debate, and I will emphasize that the debate was cordial and very well intentioned by every board member who was present. And so it was that's the way it's supposed to work. But but as I did on the last one, I was one of the 2 votes that voted against, right? And that's why I wanted to be consistent in my votes here. Again, I emphasize I don't have a problem with this project or any of the projects that were kind of put forth. For me, this is just a kind of expression of hope that there can be some amount of increased fairness around it. Again, I think we got the big point right. We've got a 40-60 split. Now it's just trying to get the little things right, which is to deal with the first in or the first in line kind of points that I've already made. Thank you so much for my rambling comments.
Thank you, Pete. Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So as I've looked at this application and gone through again the the materials, one of the things that I would note is the total program costs are supposed to be over $22 million. And they've gotten some WIFA grants, some conservation money. They're trying to get this grant. They've also got some congressionally directed spending, but even so, there's a big gap left. In other words, we don't know how much the community is going to have to borrow or put up with their own money. And so in that sense, for us to back off on one grant arbitrarily, because the total cost could still end up being 20/80, 30/70, and the grants of that could be a minority still. We don't know. Maybe they'll continue to go and get some more congressionally spended or other grants, and good luck to them. But my point is it would feel, now as I've re-looked at it and contemplated my vote, I completely appreciate what some of the members of the committee are doing. And we've talked about this over and over and over, but in my mind now, it may or may not change how much money they're putting forward as part of the total project. And so the grant opportunity gives them, under our current rules, the opportunity for $2 million in grants. And staff recommends that, and it fits in our parameters. And they're still going out and trying to find out more money, which they could end up coming back and trying to get some loans to fill that $22 million grant. It would be arbitrary in my mind to not give them that $2 million. And so with that, I am prepared to move this forward as the committee voted to move this project forward and give them the full $2 million grant.
Thank you. Buchanan. Patrice.
Yes, and thank you. And in light of, and I'm sorry, I can't be there in person, and I wasn't sure who the last speaker was, but I assume it's Mr. Lyon. Is that correct? In light of that, I guess I don't need to say too much other than I will say that the committee did grapple with this. We had a very cordial and I think a very good discussion. It's very clear. All of us are trying to be good stewards of the trust. We're all trying to do the right thing. However, I would note that the 60/40 resolution, I think it's a great one. I think it will help us be a revolving fund and making sure we have money available in the future. But that came after the fact. And I think the reason that myself and others were in supportive of going ahead with full funding on some of these projects, D, F, and G, was because at the time that it was the applications came in without that 60/40 breakdown, without that 60/40 resolution. And quite frankly, the staff used and set forth recommendations based on the metrics that were applied at the time. They made these recommendations. And quite frankly, although we all want to be good stewards, I absolutely heard what Mr. Cook and Mr. Kim said, and I so appreciate that point of view. But I also have to take a look at the fact that, in fact, we were moving the goalpost in the middle of the game. And the second is, as a member of the Board of Supervisors here in Coconino County, I understand the financial juggling of local governments and even local governments that would certainly appear on paper to have financial ability. But many times, in order to do these large projects, especially these large capital projects, we're looking at grants from all over, federal, state, and we're really robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I agree with the last speaker that we don't always know the financial ability to get these projects done. I certainly have lived that here as a supervisor. So I am in support of the resolution as presented to this full board. And thank you all, and thank you, my colleagues, for a great discussion Monday on this.
Thanks, Patrice. Any other hands? Any additional board discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have one
Yes.
other comment, if you don't mind.
Ken, go ahead.
Also, I would like to say, as I've contemplated this, I do believe that if we were to go and readjust it it would change the rules. And I'm not opposed to changing the rules. I think I'm just opposed to changing the rules right now. Let's get this project underway. Let's get it down the road. You know, staff explained to me that they would have to change their rubric, and they would certainly have to change their baseline for recommendations to the committee. And that doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't, that we have to always go with staff recommendations. We shouldn't. I think in the early stages of this fund, it's important to get the projects out under the rules as has been described. And so, like I said, with that, I'm prepared to make a motion to move this forward. If you're ready for that, Mr. Chair.
I am ready.
Mr. Chair,
Well, hang on, let me just ask if we've had any public comment requests? Nothing? All right. Is there any additional board discussion? If not, Buchanan, go ahead.
I will make a motion that we accept the Water Supply Development Fund Committee's and we pass resolution 2025-028 Mojave County Flood District.
All right. Do we have a second? Second, Richard Nunn. Second from Richard. I'm going to ask for a roll call on this.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with Mr. Beckham.
I'll explain my vote. I'm going to vote yes, only because of Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Davis's last comment about the changing of the rules. I wasn't part of the committee. Without the reliance of others on certain rules that were set, and now we would change them on them, I think we have to be providing more loans here and fewer grants. We are going to drain this thing. And Pete Kim's right. It's a race to the courthouse. It's that classic thing. Whoever runs here and gets in first gets the grants, and everybody else gets stuck with the with 100% loan if we're going to try to keep this thing going. So I find that very distasteful. So the only reason I'm voting yes is this change of the rules issue, which I'm not real familiar with. I'm just taking it on face.
Thank you, David.
Mr. Cook.
Nay.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Ms. Horstman.
Aye.
Mr. Kim.
Nay, explain my vote. Once again, some symbolic and consistency kind of position here. I am sort of swayed a bit by the notion of changing the rules. I do think that but I also note in passing that there's a reason why these things come up for a vote. And so, but I do think that on balance, I'm okay with this project going forward, though I will vote no on the consistency side of things. That being said, I do think that in the future we need to re-examine perhaps next year after the current crop has gone through how we are administering these programs in kind of like that ever-present desire to improve how we do these things. I don't like the first come, first served, race to the courthouse, whatever you want to call it, sort of dynamic here. But, at the end of the day, nothing is perfect. And so with that, I will vote no. Thank you very much.
Ms. Montgomery, or Mr. Lunt.
I vote aye. May I explain my vote? As I said yesterday, we're plowing new ground here. And to change the diameter of the row in midfield, it just doesn't work. And I certainly hear the sentiments of the other side. I too feel that, yes, we need to make this as useful as possible, but sometimes we don't always see the full picture. So with that, I vote aye.
Ms. Montgomery.
Mr. Chairman, can I explain my vote?
Please.
I'm going to vote aye on this, or yes, but I want to raise something that I was not able to attend the committee meeting. I had planned to attend and I had something come up I could not avoid, so I could not attend. So I'm going to vote aye because, of course, I'm here. I'm going to accept the recommendation of the committee. And I hear all the discussion of the changing the rules. That's actually not my concern here. So I want to just signal moving forward that, and let me elaborate, but that we need to, every one of these is going to have to be looked at, knowing that we have 40% grants and 60% loans. Every one of these, I think we have to go back to the statutory authority and ask ourselves, is this really a water supply development project? Is this really something that we believe has a reasonable potential to increase supplies, kind of as dictated by the legislature? And when I studied this, but prior to the November meeting, and I didn't get to raise this to committee then because we tabled these. To me, this is a flood control project. To me, they are not the water provider. I see no evidence that this is going to actually be a water supply development project, that the infiltration will be there, just out of the materials that I've studied. So I just, if there were, I think this is distinguishable, for example, from Clarkdale's that's later on, where they are the water supplier and they're going to do some infiltration and they're in the best position to know whether that would be successful. Here, this is truly, in my mind, just a flood control project. I'm not sure it really lives up to the water supply development standards. Having said all of that, I wasn't there to raise this issue to the committee, and I apologize for that. But I do want to signal moving forward that, you know, each of these in my mind is going to be vetted through that statutory structure. And I'm going to ask, do I really think, particularly if you're not a water provider yourself, is this truly a water supply development project? And is it something that of that 40% we should dedicate grant funds to? So that's a different kind of twist on the conversation, but I did want to present it so that folks know that, at least from my perspective, I'm really going to be looking at that moving forward very closely. So I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate the explanation.
Mr. Tomier?
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to explain my vote.
Yes, sir.
This is one of the more difficult votes I think we faced, at least from my perspective. We've wrestled with a lot of issues. I think there's been brilliant points brought up by every member of this board, which I have tremendous respect for. I too do not serve on this committee. And so when in doubt, I'm going to defer to the committee's wisdom and recommendation. And in this case, I'm going to vote aye.
And Chairman Lines?
Aye.
By a vote of 7 yes and 2 no. I should have mentioned this before the vote as well, but this did require 6 votes, a supermajority, and the vote does pass.
Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 14E, resolution 2025-029, Town of Miami. And Ted, this falls into that same discussion.
Mr. Chair, no, this one does not.
This one did not, okay.
So the other two are F and J.
F and J, okay. All right, Lindsay, we'll go to you.
Thank you. So the town of Miami plans to update their wastewater reclamation facility by completing several key facility improvements aimed at resolving an ADEQ consent order. The town estimates that with this project, the reclaimed water production will increase from 168 acre feet to 717 acre feet annually. The town has 3 USDA loans and have maintained the financial health of the system and have met that obligations to date. And the Water Supply Development Committee did recommend approval by a unanimous vote for 100% grant for $2 million. There's no significant findings noted by staff, and we should have applicant representative Alexis Rivera available for any questions.
Thank you. Board have any questions?
I have one comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Sue.
I wasn't at the committee meeting, so I'm obviously going to defer to the committee. But I want to point out in this case, one of the things that troubled me about this project is they're doing wonderful things. And I think the town of Miami should be commended for the work they're doing. But if you look at this, a lot of the reclaimed water that's going to be produced is going to go to Freeport. And a lot of the water that is going to be produced from this, according to the materials I've read in the packet, is going to go to Freeport Minerals, Freeport Mine, to ensure a sufficient supply for Freeport. And Freeport's the lifeblood of Miami, I understand that. But what troubles me here is when money is so tight, this committee or this board is going to approve something that ultimately is going to benefit a mining company that really makes gazillions of dollars every year. So from my perspective, that was a bit concerning, but overall, I think the project is very worthy. But this is the sort of thing I'm going to ask myself when I look at these, who is this really benefiting? And so producing, going from 168 acre feet to 717 acre feet to ensure that Freeport has additional water when maybe they could kick in some money to the town of Miami, perhaps they have, is a bit concerning to me. So I'm just going to flag that, but I am going to vote in favor of this. I just wanted to be clear.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you for your indulgence.
I love your insights. Tell us how you really feel. All right, do we have?
I'm gonna hold
any-
back.
Do we have any requests for public comment?
We do not,
Everybody back
Mr.
to the
Chair.
board for any additional questions or dialogue? All right, if not, then we will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we accept the committee's recommendation and pass resolution 2025-029, Town of Miami.
Thank you, Buchanan. Do we have a second?
I will second that, Richard Lunt.
Thank you, Richard. Any additional board member discussion? We will call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Item 14F, resolution 2025 Karen, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make it clear for the record that I have to depart the meeting now. I have a 10:30 conflict, so have great holidays, everybody.
Thank you, Karen. Item 14F, resolution 2025-030, Town of Quartzsite. Lindsay, please lead the discussion.
Thank you. So Quartzsite has requested just under 1.8 million for their water supply expansion and consolidation project. This project will extend their water system by installing nearly 5,000 feet of water line to connect new customers to their system. The town has one existing SRF loan that matured in FY23, and they were able to meet the debt service coverage requirements with system revenues, and they are also planning a future rate increase to assist with future capital projects. The Water Supply Committee recommended approval for this project by a 4-2 vote for 100% grant for the 1.795 million. There were no significant findings noted by staff, and we should have applicant representative Jim Ferguson available for any questions.
Any more questions for staff?
Chair, this is Tim. I'm gonna reflect back to Sue Montgomery's point about how does this match up with a water supply development. I understand connecting customers to a system as a valuable activity. I'm just curious about staff's interpretation of how this qualifies for water supply development.
So certainly, I think it qualifies under the statutory eligibilities for this fund. It's anything really related to conveyance, which it very much is a conveyance project, extending water lines. So I feel that it is a good fit for the water supply fund under statute and intent, but I don't know.
Yeah, the title of the use of the word title, or the use of the word supply, or supply development in the title of the program implies maybe a little bit narrower scope than what is actually allowed by the statutory criteria. So system upgrades without adding new supplies is certainly allowed by the statute, even though the plain language in the title may imply.
That's fair. I'm not arguing about the title. I'm just saying, in my opinion, this is the type of project that would have been funded under a very different program in any other year prior to this fund being developed.
This project reflects, there is quite a bit of overlap between what is allowed under the SRFs, particularly Clean Water SRF and this. We have not tried to exclude, we've not tried to use eligibility of SRFs as a way to exclude projects from it. But yes, to your point, there's a large overlap between Clean Water SRF eligibility and this eligibility. And this would be, I think, clearly eligible for, well, I think.
Yeah.
My final point in response to that is during the conservation fund discussions, we frequently and quite often deferred projects to the more appropriate fund when we thought it wasn't an ideal fit for the conservation fund. I don't think this is an ideal fit for the water supply development. How I vote may have nothing to do with that point that I wanted to make on the record, that I think we should apply the same standards of what are we trying to achieve with each fund, as we did with the conservation funds. I think we were wildly successful with the conservation fund. I don't want us to treat this fund differently. In my view, I think there's a risk of that. Not saying we're doing that. I'm saying let's be on guard.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have a request for public comments?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, bring it back to the board. Any questions for, any additional questions for staff or for the applicant?
I do.
Okay, David.
And that is, I'm following up on Ted. Again, I'm not part of the committee. But he pointed out again, this one, as well as Clarkdale coming up, have an ability to pay. And my vote will be the same for the same reasons as before. But I do want to send the signal that no more like this. I don't think it's appropriate. We're going to kill our fund here. And so I know we wanted to get the funds out and start the projects moving, get the water supply development fund moving. But at the same time, maybe we're a little more lenient to start.
Thank you, David. Any additional board discussion? May we have a motion on agenda item 14F for resolution 2025-030?
Mr. Chair,
Buchanan?
I'll make a motion, but first a quick comment, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
The problem though is what if Quartzsite was asking for 1,700 or 1,700,000 in a grant and 60% beyond that in a loan? We would be completely okay with that. But the reasons why we're not okay with this, because we're worried about depleting our fund. But that's going to deplete our fund and our grant money just as quickly. And so that's why I kind of struggle with that notion. If this fits and it's still under our caps, then, and we don't know how much money they're investing of their own outside of this and whether they want our loans or not, that's where I've struggled with it. And so I appreciate the idea, but again, in this case and in some of the other examples, we're not going to deplete our fund any less quickly. If Mojave County would have come with the $2 million grant and a $6 million loan, which they might still potentially, we haven't depleted our fund any less quickly. And so I don't know. Again, I feel it. I know it. I get where we're going, but at the same time, it all comes back to depleting the fund, and that's not going to change any. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that we pass this as recommended by the committee, resolution 2025-030 for the town of Quartzsite.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I will second that, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Any additional board member discussion? Call for the question. All in favor? Let's do it by roll call.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'll start with Mr. Beckham.
I do have a point that, yes, you're somewhat correct, Mr. Davis, but that's assuming the other piece of it's 100% loan in your example. And therefore, if a different applicant were that second piece, it would be 100% loan to them to make your example work. And I don't think we're not doing many 100% loans. Anyway, point of order, I vote aye.
Mr. Cook.
May I explain my vote, please?
Yes, sir.
So I can't repeat this verbatim, but to repeat basically what Mr. Beckham said, I'm voting the same way for the same reasons, but I also have just a slight comment to Mr. Davis's. I understand what you're saying as far as what if this had come in or any of these other projects for the same amount as the grant and some additional amount for a loan. We would probably enthusiastically support that, all other things being equal, and it doesn't deplete the fund. But to Mr. Beckham's point, yeah, it might, because then there would not be as much. Well, we're uncertain about whether or not the remaining funds would be available, as Mr. Beckham just said, So let me back up. So instead of, if this applicant or any applicant did not take a loan along with their grant, the unlent amount would still be available, yes, under the cap, but for another 100% grant loan and another 100% grant loan. Whereas a grant plus a loan would fit within the 60-40, whereas just a grant doesn't necessarily. If that's clear to everyone. Yeah. Sure.
Could you,
Thank you.
would you clarify your vote, Mr. Cook? Thank you. Mr. Davis,
I vote aye.
Ms. Horstman,
Aye.
Mr. Kim.
Nay, explain my vote.
Yes, sir.
I love this discussion. I think this is exactly what we're supposed to be wrestling with. And I do think that, you know, in kind of commentary on some of the earlier thoughts on this matter, if indeed a party were to gross up, you know, their loan amount in order to cover from a percentage perspective or a ratio perspective, that's also the reason why we have staff review on these types of things to detect that sort of shenanigan. That didn't happen here, and I'm not sure it's happened on anything, but like it could. But in general on this, I do like the debate. I think this is very healthy for reasons that I have already given on past similar instances. I continue to vote nay.
Mr. Lent,
Aye.
Ms. Montgomery,
Aye.
Mr. Tomier,
Aye.
and Chairman Lyons.
Aye.
Vote of 7 yes, 2 no.
Motion carries. Thank you. 14G, Resolution 2025-031, American Indian Christian Mission. Lindsay.
Thank you. So American Indian Christian Mission is a public water system near Sholo. It's been an active boarding school campus providing education to Native American youth for northeastern Arizona for nearly 50 years. The critical components of the water system are original to the founding of the school and in recent years have begun to fail. In 2023, WIFA provided $250,000 as a 100% forgivable drinking water SRF loan to construct the new well. And then with this request, they plan to construct a storage tank, install a booster station, and replace aging water lines. They are a tax exempt organization with their primary revenue coming from contributions and tuition. They have no existing long-term debt obligations. The Water Supply Committee did recommend approval by a unanimous vote for 100% grant for the $1.488 million, and there's no significant findings noted by staff. We should have Blake Anderson with Mogollon Water and Zach Barlow with Ironside Engineering available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Do we have any questions from the board for staff or for the applicant? Have we received a request for public comment?
We have not, Mr. Chair.
Coming back to the board, any additional discussion? May we have a motion on agenda item 14G for resolution 2025-031?
Mr. Chairman, I, Richard Lunt, would so move.
Thank you, Richard. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
David Beckham, I'll second.
Second. Any additional discussion? Not, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Thank you. The motion passes. Agenda item 14H, resolution 2025-032, Town of Jerome. Lindsay.
Thank you. So the town of Jerome has requested just over 1.4 million to replace 200 linear feet of pipe at their Mescal siphon, which is a century-old piece of infrastructure, which is located in a highly challenging terrain, making it prone to leaks, pipe bursts, and structural failure. The school street regulator will also be replaced with a pressure-reducing valve, and they plan to upgrade all adjacent water lines and add enhanced monitoring and control systems. A review of their finances indicated they had limited capacity to take on additional debt, and their water supply is needed to prevent catastrophic failures as the siphon supplies 75% of the town's water supply. The committee recommended approval by unanimous vote for 100% grant for this project, and there's no significant findings noted by staff, and we should have applicant representatives available. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Do we have any questions from the board for the applicant or for staff? None. Okay. Do we have any requests for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, bring it back to the board for any additional discussion. If not, may we have a motion for agenda item 14H, resolution 2025-032.
Mr. Chairman, Sue Montgomery,
Sue?
I'd move to approve resolution 2025-032, Town of Jerome.
Thank you, Sue. Do we have a second?
Richard Lunt, second that.
Thank you. Any additional board member discussion? If not, we will call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 14I, resolution 2025-033, Q Mountain Mobile Home Park, DBA Q Mountain Vista Water Company. Lindsay.
Thank you. Q Mountain is a small mobile home park in Quartzsite, Arizona. They manage their water system, which is Q Mountain Vista Water. It's currently experiencing high water loss due to the old deteriorating water lines. They did receive an SRF loan in 2018 to replace a portion of their distribution system, and they are still needing approximately 6,000 feet replaced, which this funding request would fund the replacement of. The existing SRF loan is in good standing, and they've consistently met their debt service coverage, except 1 year, which had a large non-reoccurring expense. Despite their strong financial management of the current loan, they are a small system with low income residents, and taking on additional debt would require a rate increase to support it. The Water Supply Committee did recommend approval by a unanimous vote for 100% grant for this project, and there's no significant findings noted by staff. And we should have the applicant representatives, I believe they're in the room, available for any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Are there any questions from the board or staff or for the applicant?
Mr. Kim has a hand raised.
Sorry?
Mr. Kim has.
Oh, all right. Pete.
Hi there. Me again, Pete Kim. So the reason why I want to comment on this one is this is the application that I think kind of got jerked around the most. And I wanted to, and I went up to them afterwards and I apologized because of the thrash. And then, and I just want to say that I'm voting for this one. But I want to note in passing that, you know, on the priority value points list, this is that synthetic score that we've created on a case-by-case basis. This one scored 350 out of 440, and the other ones that we've just looked at were kind of in the low twos, 200, 220, 230, something like that. And this is the case that I'm worried about. If we spend all the money or give away all the money that we have for granting in the short term, then these are the guys that, if they had happened to show up a little bit later, would get nothing. And that's what disturbs me. Just beyond going past, like, sort of general complaints, I'd urge the staff to kind of take a look at the current scoring policy because, and this is non-scientific, and I think staff could go back and actually do the accounting of this. But take a look at what is going to be the outcomes based upon the recommendations and the superposition of the score distributions. I think what you're going to find is that with current sort of recommendations or guidelines, if right now, basically anything, I think it's over 230 or 240, something like that, is qualified theoretically for 100% grants. Well, now we see how that's playing out, and it almost guarantees that we're going to have this type of dynamic. This is exactly the sort of thing that I think needs to be addressed in future sort of policies and procedures to kind of avoid this type of thing. So that being said, I'm supportive of this. And, again, think that this all of this debate is very healthy as we continue to learn how to administer this fund well and continue to be good stewards of these funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Any additional comments from the board? All right, may we have a motion on agenda item 14I for 2025-033 Q Mountain Mobile Home Park?
Mr. Chair, I so moved that we accept the committee's recommendation and pass resolution 2025-033 Q Mountain Mobile Park.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this is Pete Kim, I second.
Thank you, Pete. Any additional board member discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 14J, resolution 2025-034, Town of Clarkdale. Lindsay.
Thank you. So this will be the last water supply project on your agenda for today. So we have the town of Clarkdale, who have the Valley View Cemetery, which is a 20-acre site located in an area with 13 wells, including one of 2 wells that supply the town's water system. This project would install 5,800 feet of trenches throughout the Valley View Cemetery to conserve 3.5 to 12.8 acre feet per year of stormwater by capturing and infiltrating it. This would help to improve the reliability of the wells in the area and help the water system, as private well owners in the area would hopefully not need to connect to the town's water system. Clarkdale has 1 WIFA loan, which is in good standing, and they've met their minimum debt service coverage and are projected to continue meeting debt service coverage on that loan. The Water Supply Development Committee recommended approval of this project by a 4-2 vote for a 100% grant for $900,000, and there's no significant findings noted by staff. So we should have applicant representatives online for any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Pete, go ahead.
This is Pete Kim. This is exactly what I was talking about, 220 out of 440. As we did in the committee hearing, could we please have a recounting of the exact components of that 220?
Yes, absolutely. And so they did have a total priority value points of 220 out of 440, as you noted. They had water demand points, 0 out of 150, project benefit points, 130 out of 130, feasibility points, 20 out of 60, and financial need points, 70 out of 100.
And under the current sort of guidelines, what is the up to the recommended, or sorry, what's the sort of grant amount that's possible?
It'd be up to $2 million as a 100% grant based on their index of 70% or 75%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Any additional questions for staff or the applicant?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, we can.
As we're at the end of the list, just kind of make a point that, this gives us all a flavor, a broader audience, a flavor of some of the discussion that's been going on, and it's a good discussion and it's a robust debate. And as we go forward with this, if the committee desires to somehow change the rubric or where we want to ask those applicants who are asking for free money to also take some cheap money in the form of a loan, that's something we can talk about and discuss, but that's not been the direction to staff. We haven't said, we want you to come to every application and have an element of loan and an element of grant. And these are the parameters that we have set. And so this has been a good discussion, and we'll continue to go down that as we've stated and as we've said as a committee. But I'm sure this debate will evolve and continue in the committee. And so welcome you all to join those conversations moving forward. But we've done good work under the guidelines that this board has set and asked staff to do and go forward with. And so it's been good work. And so I just wanted to reiterate that and looking forward to continue work on this one. And as such, I'm ready to make a motion. Looks like you have other comments first, so I'll let you, before I make a motion.
Yeah, if you'll hold that for a second.
Yep, I will.
From the town of Clarkdale, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just here to answer any questions, but I did want to reiterate what I said during the committee meeting, which was that we have about over $20 million worth of projects that need to be done. And so using the guidelines that were put out, we have determined how to cover all of those projects. This particular one, we asked for a grant, but we have another application with WIFA right now that does include a large loan component. So this was just how we put together our portfolio of covering all of our community needs. And this particular project without a grant probably would not happen, because when we have to make a decision between a well that's going to give people water and a project that is going to conserve water and recharge our aquifer, obviously the number one priority is getting water to people. this is a long-term approach that will help both our water system as well as the Verde River flows, since the Verde River runs right through our town. And I just, really ask that you consider that. And also, think about that just because it looks like you can pay more, or, do something that's not a grant, it's sort of like making a cake and saying, well, we'll give you half the flour for the cake, but without the whole flour, you're not going to be able to do the project. So I do ask for your support of this, and please take my word that we are absolutely taking on tremendous debt, just not on this particular project. So thank you for your time and listening to us.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Certainly. I'm Susan Guthrie. I'm the town manager for the town of Clarkdale.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, bring that back to the board.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I believe there is a motion. Is that correct on the floor?
he began, but I held him back.
And once the motion is made, I'll make a second.
Mr. Chair, then I'll make a motion that we pass resolution 2025-034, Town of Clarkdale.
Patrice?
And second.
All right. Any additional board member discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Let's go to a roll call vote just to make sure.
Sounds good, Mr. Chairman. As a reminder, board members, this is a motion to approve the resolution in front of you for the town of Clarkdale, and it does require 6 affirmative votes. Mr. Beckham.
Aye.
Mr.
Same
Cook.
caveats as before.
Mr. Cook.
Nay, with the same comments as before.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Ms. Horstman.
Patrice?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, aye.
Mr. Kim.
Nay, explain my vote. As before, same comments, same theory. I am not saying anything bad about the town of Clarkdale or the financial planning that they had to go through in order to put forth this application. I think that my commentary here really focuses upon how we approach the market and what the initial message is that we send, and then how that ripples downstream from there. That being said, as before and referencing previous commentary, I vote nay.
Mr. Lunt.
Aye.
Ms. Montgomery.
I want to vote aye on this, and just briefly to really commend Clarkdale, because it is tough when you're chased between these things of, do we devote even time and resources to putting together a project that is looking long-term about protecting the aquifer, about protecting the Verde River? I mean, just coming here and just going through the process of applying is a bit of a project, as we've all illustrated a little bit here. So to think long range, these things, this fund is precisely the sort of thing that makes sense for someone like, for something like Clarkdale, for the town of Clarkdale. And if they were just tasked with choosing between, do we have to get a well in or an arsenic treatment system to make sure we have water for our community, and yet they're still going forward and thinking long-term and trying to get this grant fund to move this forward as a water supplier of that community. So I think it's impressive, and I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Mr. Tomier.
Aye.
Chairman Lyons.
Aye.
Vote of 7 yes, 2 no.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. We're gonna take a 10-minute recess till 5 after 11.
It's a big money.
And,
I understand. I'm sorry.
That's fine. And I started typing, they were deleted, and I was like, I hope he's in the right one, because I can't see where. I did it. Yeah, they're in the conservation zone. But it's the one that you added in the last.
It
I'm
does.
not saying these words.
Yeah, no,
I feel like that.
no, I agree. But then it does.
Sure, the committee has that latitude. There's a line in there about.
Everybody had 2 extra minutes. All right, I'm trying to get that back. All right, agenda item number 15. Yeah, let's do a roll call just for fun, Ms. Mendoza. Just kind of bring us back.
David Beckham,
Present.
Ted Cook,
Here.
Buchanan Davis,
Present.
Patrice Horseman.
Present.
Thank you. Pete Kim. Go back to him. Richard Lunt.
Pete's there.
Oh, Pete, present. Pete's present. Richard Lunt.
Present.
Thank you. Sue Montgomery.
Here.
Tim Tamur
Here.
and Jonathan Light.
Here.
Thank you. Now calling on non-voting members. Ray DeCiccio. Gail Griffin. Karen Peters left the meeting and all other members are absent. Roll call is complete.
Thank you very much. We still maintain a quorum and we'll go to agenda item 15, Safford Unified School District. WC 3-111-2024. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are asking that the board reaffirms their approval of this resolution for this project. As a background for it, so Safford Unified School District applied for and was awarded $250,000 grant from the Water Conservation Grant Fund to convert their athletic field to artificial turf. In their application and in their grant agreement, they had listed 1.45 million as the match amount, excuse me, and the total project cost as 1.7 million. However, the grantee has recently indicated to us that the total cost is $351,677, which would reduce their match amount to $101,677 of match. They have requested a grant agreement amendment to reflect this. This request would reduce the match amount, but would not alter the scope of the project as described in the application. And then additionally, just a note, we did have a correction on the minimum 25% of 250,000 is 62,500. So the requested reduction would still be more than the 25% minimum required. And however, because the reduction was so significant in the match amount and the large match amount was highlighted as a project benefit by the board, when approved, staff determined that board approval of this modification would be required. We're therefore asking the board to reaffirm their approval of resolution 2024-076 with the understanding that the match provided would be reduced to $101,677.
Thank you, Lindsay. Do we have any questions from the board for staff? Do we have any requests for public comment?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
We'll bring it back to the board. We do not have any additional comments. Can we have a motion on agenda item 15 to reaffirm the grant award for grant application WC 3-111-2024, considering the change in match as presented?
I would so move. Richard Lunt.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have a second?
Second, Ted.
Ted? Any additional board member discussion? We'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes. Agenda item 16A, grant application WC 4-194-2024, Town of Oro Valley, and the 16B grant application WC 214-2024, Town of Marana. Lindsay.
Thank you. So just recently, we had one grantee decline their grant award, as well as another complete their project and be obligated just the very small remaining amount of funds. With those two amounts, we have in total $26,524.93 that can be reallocated to other projects. Because at the June 25th meeting, the board decided to reallocate past funds to the projects that were previously partially funded for Oro Valley and the Town of Marana. We have added those projects for your consideration to reallocate the existing funds. So I'm happy to take any questions on that. It is not a totally even number, so there would be one penny that goes somewhere specific if decided to split it evenly. But otherwise, happy to answer any questions regarding this.
Do we have any questions? Do we have any requests for public comment?
We do not.
All right, one last time to the board. Any additional questions?
Sure.
Yes.
Is it possible, given the history on these, on 16A and 16B in a similar situation that we had before, where we just split it to have one motion to encompass 16A and B?
Sure. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I recommend that the board, I'm not sure exactly how to state this, that the board evenly split the available funding from the return, I'll call it, of $26,524.93 as evenly as possible between the town of Oro Valley, WC 4-194 2024, and town of Marana, WC 5-214 2024. And if there's a penny difference, then staff can flip a coin.
Joe, are you good with that?
I think it's sufficient direction for the staff here. Yes, thank you.
David, this is David Beckham. I'll second that, except the staff should keep the penny.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, David. We have a motion and a second. I will call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. Agenda item 17, update on the WIFA director position, hiring and retention process. Chuck, would you like to talk about that? Or is this a good time for somebody to make a motion that we go into executive session?
I would recommend that you have the discussion in executive session.
Okay. I would so move.
I would, yeah, you may want to offer the motion, so it's, the
All right.
reasons are on the record.
Here's the exact language of the motion. We have a motion, we've got a motion to enter into the executive session for the purpose of discussing and considering personnel matters associated with employment of the WIFA director as authorized by ARS 38-431-03A1 and for level advice as authorized by ARS 38-431-3A and 3. We do have one motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes and we will adjourn into executive session. welcome you back into regular session. And it is now 11:43. During the executive session, the board had the opportunity to discuss hiring an interim director. And I am ready to proceed with the language. And the language is such as, may we have a motion to authorize the chair to negotiate and retain Chelsea McGuire as interim director, who will serve at the pleasure of the board and be responsible for overseeing the hiring WIFA staff for a limited period of time until the board hires a new director.
Mr. Chair, this is Tim. I would make that motion.
I'll say. Okay.
Before we go ahead and do that, I'd suggest you do a roll call vote since we do have virtual attendees.
Okay.
To make sure everyone's here.
Very good. We do that roll call vote now.
Absolutely. We will start with Mr. Beckham, who is absent. Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Ms. Horstman.
Aye.
Mr. Kim.
Aye.
Mr. Lent.
Aye.
Ms. Montgomery.
Aye.
Mr. Tonier.
Aye.
And Chairman Lyons.
Aye.
8 yes, 0 no, 1 not voting.
All right. So thank you very much. And at this time, I wanted to take a moment just to thank Chuck. It's been a pleasure to reconstruct WIFA with him at the helm over the past couple of years. Grateful for your dedication and leadership and for putting together such an amazing team. I think that's probably one of the most important things is that you have hired people who have captured that vision and who are doing what's best for the state. That's a reflection of your leadership. I want to give you a second to say something if you want.
Thank you. I tried to sort of lay out my case in September. It's been an absolute honor. It's been a long time before taking over the role, helping get this up and running. And yeah, to see it come to this place, to have a staff and a team to be able to do this, to have true meaningful governance and engaged board that we follow and that trust us has been critical. And I think we're showing people that we're doing something real. We haven't won over all the skeptics, but I think we're legit, we're real, and we're moving forward with integrity. So thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, and at this point in time, we're going to go to agenda item number 18, call to the public. This is a time for any additional public comments. Comments would be limited to 3 minutes. Have we received any requests for public comment, or does anybody here want to address?
We've received no requests online, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 19, this is the opportunity for members to identify any topics they would like to be placed on the agenda at a future meeting.
The only outstanding item we have on the agenda right now is a ADEQ briefing on lead inventory. We will look for that at probably a January or February meeting as offered by Director Peters. And then not to beat a dead horse, but there's a lot of discussion about the future of the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund. We don't have any immediate agenda items, but that is something that we will take into account, both the board and the committee's actions as a body by your votes, as well as your individual comments in our periodic review of how to improve the programs.
Thank you very much. And tentatively, our next meeting is scheduled for January 15th. We may flex on that a little bit, pending some meetings the first couple of weeks of January. And if there's nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting, and it is 11:47. Merry Christmas.